On. The former State Department Deputy Spokesman Adam Morelli on why that venue matters. Ambassador, the president seems to want it in the demilitarized zone. Other presidents have visited that zone in the past without discussions with the North Korean leader. Where do you think it will ultimately be?
Well, your guess is as good as mine, quite frankly. I got to say, I think everybody's, I for one am shocked that we're even having this discussion, to tell you the truth, because if you just think back to earlier this year, the president was talking about fire and fury and calling him Little Rocket Man, and North Korea was testing ballistic missiles, and Hawaii went on a missile alert. And look how far we've come in such a short period of time, which, frankly, I have to say, I think the president has proved the skeptics wrong in this. Now, with respect to the location itself, look, historically, when you have sort of these summits between rival powers, you like to choose neutral territory. I'm thinking of President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev meeting in Iceland, the Reykjavik summit, for example. The demilitarized zone is, I guess, neutral territory, but it's neutral territory in the middle of a war zone. On the one hand, that would be, would certainly show the president kind of going to the belly of the beast and looking presidential. However, it's a little close for comfort with all those loaded guns pointed at each other in that very spot. So my guess is it's not going to be in the demilitarized zone. It'll be in some neutral territory, not China. Mongolia kind of makes sense. I mean, remember, it's not that easy for the North Korean leader to get around, and I don't think he's going to want to go too far from home, given the kind of regime that he runs. So Mongolia makes sense, but look, the venue is important, but what strikes me is also worth talking about or considering is, I am stunned that the North Koreans have floated a proposal before the meeting. I mean, they've gotten
actually several proposals, Ambassador. They've already talked about stopping their missile tests, dismantling their entire nuclear program. And the one thing they asked in return, I think, in one of the original discussions was that we would agree not to attack them. And I'm wondering, it almost seems like too much of a layup. What do you make of that?
I just, again, this story never ceases to surprise and to have twists and turns. I mean, the fact of the matter is, for a reclusive, hidebound, archaic regime, they are proving surprisingly subtle and tactful and aggressive. I mean, they're driving the agenda. They're putting forward their negotiating positions,
is a 180
to which now we have to respond.
This is a 180 from what they were 6 months ago. Now, well, you'd like to see this new, about face as welcome or whatever. I worry, and I don't mean to be cynical or jaded here. I just worry that they're being a little too forthcoming, a little too agreeable, and I don't know what to make of it.
But, Mr. Cavuto, you could say the same thing about the President of the United States.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You know that?
So that's why this is such a great story to watch and a difficult one to predict.
No, you're absolutely right about that. We've come a long way from Rocket Man, I guess. So, Ambassador, thank you very, very much. In the meantime, the South Korean president says, whatever happens to this, and by the way, the Nigerian leader has arrived at the White House here. Muhammad Buhari has been fighting a war, we should stress, with ISIS elements, including Boko Haram. And in the northeast of the country, it's so bad that Boko Haram is actually in control of that portion of the country, about a fifth of the country, and people there pay taxes to Boko Haram. So he desperately wants financial, military aid, a lot of weaponry from the president. No indication yet whether he's going to get that. It's been an aggressive back and forth. Other groups have come forward to say, this Nigerian guy is not exactly a saint. His forces have been going after Christians in the country, so don't give him a dime. And back and forth we go. We'll keep a close eye on him. They're both going to be making a joint statement in a little bit more than an hour and a half. Anyway, back to what's going on in North Korea right now and the back and forth there. The South Korean leader has already said, after many in his country were saying, you, sir, deserve a Nobel Peace Prize, he just said, no, it should actually go to Donald Trump if it ever comes to pass. He deserves it. He got us talking. He got us going. But the way you've been watching a lot of the media portray it, and we can rifle through some of these headlines, the feeling seems to be that the president really isn't helping matters any, that Trump's incoherence on North Korea and Iran, to quote a Washington Post title, or the two Koreas talk peace, that Trump's bargaining chips slip away. The one in the New York Times caught my interest because it was more or less saying that the bargaining chips that he wanted have already been put on the table by the South Korean leader, as the South Korean leader said those bargaining chips were there because the president offered them. You don't know who to believe. I do know that even if he were to get a peace agreement, I wonder if it would even so much as get a 4-H fair prize for this. Anyway, to the Washington Examiner's Emily Jasinski, national security analyst Ryan Morrow. Emily, it is not unusual the media to take a very critical view of trade deals that, or other deals that might be in the making or not. This one in particular, though, seems to recognize the befuddlement of the media that all the tough talk with North Korea, calling him Little Rocket Man, everything else, might actually be paying off, that it might actually be working. What do you make of that?
Right. I think that'll be a tough pill to swallow as things progress for a lot of the president's enemies in the press. Certainly I think it's too early to give full credit, but I also think it's too early to be taking full credit away. I mean, there are a lot of things at play here. We saw what China did when it pursued the sanctions against North Korea. That had a huge effect, of course. And so there's a lot of stuff to disentangle, and there's a lot of credit to be given. But as we see things progress and as we see things play out, I do think it's heading towards what I just said, a tough pill to swallow for some in the press that thought Donald Trump would be utterly ineffective in these negotiations.
Well, Ryan, it does turn everything upside down about how you go about diplomacy, tried under Republican and Democratic presidents alike. It was a different approach, still too early, to her point that this could yield results, but it would be a kick if it did, right? I mean, we might rethink our diplomatic strategy going forward on everything.
Right. I think that the Twitter diplomacy is really being effective here by the Trump administration. And that was something everyone was panicking over, saying President Trump would cause a nuclear war. But actually what happened was that it intimidated the North Korean regime. And specifically, I think when Trump focused on the human rights record of the North Korean regime, I think that was especially effective. When you have Pompeo in there and you have Bolton in there, two individuals who have openly said we should support the North Korean opposition that wants to bring freedom to that area of the world in a place that so few thought would ever happen. I think that scared the living daylights out of Kim Jong-un, because you're already having a success here. This dramatic change in tone to the point where they're talking about getting rid of nuclear weapons and broader disarmament, that alone is a success regardless of whether it actually happens.
The president has said, Emily, that he'll up and walk away from the table if it doesn't look like they're going anywhere. I don't know what the time frame he was using or what would be, such a severe development that it would mean he'd walk away. I assume no guarantee on the part of the North Koreans that we could check them on whatever, nuclear promises they're making. But what did you make of that?
Yeah, that gets to something really interesting in how Donald Trump has handled this situation. And it's just that I think to a lot of world leaders and to North Korea, he's completely unpredictable, which is scary in and of itself, right? That they actually don't know what to expect from Donald Trump. He talks really strong, and you can sort of put this all together, whether it's military moves or sanctions or just his rhetoric. Most experts agree he's applying an unprecedented amount of pressure and is being very strong in his position towards North Korea. And so the rhetoric itself just lends to this idea that he's unpredictable and you don't know what to expect from Donald Trump. And that certainly, I think, plays a role here.
Ryan, though, I'm remembering the North Korean leader, and just 6 months ago, he was very bellicose. He was looking for the destruction of America. So I'm also going into this eyes wide open, I'm sure, as the president is and others here in this country. We hope for developments. These are certainly far more than we've seen in the past. But this is a guy who's pretty wily. His father was very wily and hoodwinked a lot of people. His grandfather the same. So I know we want to check and verify everything he commits to here, but I don't know what the real Kim Jong-un is. The crazy guy was launching missiles just a few months ago, or this guy who's trying to come off as Winston Churchill?
I don't think Kim Jong-un knows who the real Kim Jong-un is. I mean, I think he's actually that divorced from reality, but he does understand one thing. he wants to live, and he wants to live well. And apparently he feels that that is threatened. And so you can't overestimate how important it is that the tone of the North Korean regime has changed, because for decades, that was kind of the surviving ingredient of the North Korean regime. They may change tone a little bit in regards to deals, but they're always saying, death to America, we're going to nuke you. And that's suddenly all stopped. And don't forget about the connection to Iran, Assad, and reportedly Hamas and Hezbollah. So any success on the North Korean front also impacts those radical Islamic adversaries that we face. And if we start sharing information with the North Korean regime, we might get a window into those dark activities of the Iranians that we have never had before.
We'll watch closely, guys.